My name is Evelyn Mercer, and at 68, I truly believed life had already shown me every surprise it had in store. But nothing prepared me for what unfolded that quiet Sunday morning in Albuquerque. I was padding around my kitchen barefoot, the cool tiles under my feet, cradling my very first cup of coffee like it was a dear friend. The house hummed with the steady whir of the ceiling fan, while the gentle fragrance of desert roses floated in through the courtyard. It was one of those rare mornings I cherished, calm, simple, and full of gratitude for all the years of sweat and sacrifice that built this life. Then out of nowhere the doorbell rang. Now let me tell you, folks don't just show up at my doorstep. My home sits tucked behind a gated drive, a Spanish-style house I personally restored, brick by brick, after decades of backbreaking work. So if the bell rings, it means someone's already slipped past that very first gate. And that only happens when I allow it. The sound of that chime made me stop cold. I grabbed my security tablet, expecting to see a delivery truck or maybe a gardener from next door. But what I saw nearly stopped my heart. Faces I hadn't laid eyes on in 18 long years. My son Thomas, his wife Claire, and 3 teenagers I had never met, my grandchildren. For a moment I thought the camera was lying to me. I leaned closer, pulse thumping like a drum, but no, it was them, standing right there at my gate, looking as if ghosts had stepped straight out of the past. 17 years. That's how long it had been since Thomas and Claire turned their backs on me. 17 years of holidays and birthdays, graduations and weddings, every milestone you can name, all without me. And suddenly, here they were, polished up for a Sunday visit, pressing the buzzer of the house I built with my own 3 hands. I stood frozen, holding onto the counter for balance, memories rushing in like a flood. The hurt of being pushed aside never really fades. I remembered pulling photos from the mailbox of family gatherings where I hadn't even been invited, my name never once spoken. I remembered lonely Christmas mornings, staring at other people's family pictures online while my own family pretended I wasn't alive. I remembered the letters I mailed, the calls I made, all ignored or sent back unopened. That kind of ache doesn't vanish, it just sinks deeper inside. And yet, here they stood. My boy, the one I raised on my own after his daddy passed. The woman who once welcomed me with smiles but later told me I didn't fit into their polished life. And children who carried my blood but didn't know me at all. I stared at the screen, struggling to believe it. Why now? Why after all these years? Thomas's face was older, his hands still fidgeting the way he used to when he was nervous. Claire stood tall and stiff, her smile looking more practiced than warm. The teenagers shifted around, eyes darting, no doubt wondering why they'd been dragged to a stranger's door on a Sunday. My very first thought was to ignore them, let the New Mexico sun bake them back into their car. After 18 years of silence, I owed them nothing. But curiosity has a way of pushing through, even when your good sense tells you not to. I couldn't stop myself from wondering, what on earth brought them here after all this time? My hand shook as I pressed the intercom, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. "Mom," Thomas said, his voice crackling through the speaker. "It's us. We'd like to talk." Talk. That word twisted in my stomach. 4 years I had begged for just a single talk, one chance to be heard. And they always shut the door on me. Now, nearly 3 decades later, they show up unannounced wanting to talk. I stayed quiet, long enough that Claire leaned in. "Evelyn, please," she said. "We know it's been a long time, but things have changed. We thought it was time." Time. The word stung. Time had passed, all right. Time I could never get back. Time when I should have been clapping at school plays, watching very first steps, cheering at ball games. Instead, I was locked out while strangers knew my grandchildren better than I did. My grip tightened on the counter. The air inside the house felt heavy, my own breath loud in the silence. I should have told them no. I should have told them to turn right around, that the bridge had burned to ashes years ago. But some small, aching part of me kept my finger hovering over that button. And then I pressed it. The gate swung open. And with it, 18 years of buried memories came rushing back. As I waited for the knock at my door, I felt a storm gathering inside me. Whatever they wanted, I knew it wasn't going to be simple. That was the moment my past marched right back into my life, demanding a place at the table I had built without them. When I finally heard that knock, my thoughts didn't stay in the present. They carried me back to the years when it all unraveled, the years that left me standing alone. I was just a girl when I married. My husband Robert was my high school sweetheart, and we truly believed forever was ours. But forever only lasted 13 years. He was gone in an instant, a sudden heart attack, leaving me widowed at 31 with only our boy Thomas to raise. Back then we were living in Dayton, Ohio, in a little ranch house with a leaky roof and an old furnace that coughed itself apart every third winter. Money was scarce. I worked long hours at a medical billing office. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept us fed. Each morning I packed Thomas's lunch, walked him to school, then caught the bus across town. We couldn't afford a car those very first years, so that bus ride was my lifeline. At night I brought home piles of paperwork, sitting at the kitchen table until 1 a.m. While Thomas slept. I gave up plenty back then, new clothes, vacations, even an occasional dinner out. But I never let Thomas feel the lack. He had fresh notebooks every school year, a cake on his birthday, and shoes that fit when his feet outgrew the old pair. I told myself if I just worked hard enough, someday he would understand. We helped retirees keep track of pensions and Social Security so nothing slipped past them. We guided small shop owners through taxes without drowning them in fancy terms. We showed folks how to set a budget, stretch their money, and steer clear of debt. The more people I helped, the faster the business grew. By the time I hit my early 50s, it wasn't just a side project anymore. It had become a full-fledged financial services company. I named it Mercer Financial. Before long, we had an office old town. I was still putting in 66-hour weeks, but it felt different now. It wasn't just about scraping by anymore. It was about building something solid. I saw the relief on people's faces when we found solutions, and the trust they put in me meant more than words could say. That trust was worth more than the family who had cut me out. Then, at 59, I made the biggest move of my career. A regional firm offered to buy part of my company. The offer was better than I ever dreamed. I kept a share so I'd still have a hand in the work, but I sold enough to finally be free, financially secure for the very first time since Robert passed. For the very first time in decades, I wasn't worried about making rent or paying the bills. I had real safety under my feet. With that, I began looking for ways to make my money grow. That's how I found real estate in New Mexico. I had been to Albuquerque a handful of times for conferences and short vacations, and the desert kept calling me back. The wide skies, the dry heat, the mountains off in the distance, it felt like peace. Homes there were rising in value, especially older ones that needed attention. So I took another gamble. I bought a weathered adobe-style house on the outskirts of Albuquerque. The roof leaked, the walls had cracks, and the yard was nothing but weeds and dust. Folks told me I was out of my mind, but I rolled up my sleeves. I hired local crews, learned everything I could about renovations, and kept my eyes on every detail. It took nearly 3 years, but when it was done, that house was worth more than double what I paid. I sold it and bought 3 more. That was the start of my second chapter. I poured the profits back in, one property after another, until I wasn't just flipping houses anymore. I was building a portfolio. By 66, money was no longer something I lost sleep over. I had the home I live in now, plus rentals that brought in steady income. Every brick, every dollar, every late night, I built it all without Thomas, without Claire, without family gatherings that never included me. My independence became my greatest source of pride. Now, when I stand in my home with its tiled courtyard and blooming roses, I don't just see walls and furniture. I see proof that being cast aside didn't break me. It shaped me into someone stronger. That's why seeing Thomas at my gate felt so strange. For years they wanted nothing to do with me. I wasn't welcome at their tables, their photos, their children's birthdays. Yet everything I own, every ounce of peace and stability, I earned in the years after they shut me out. And as they pressed my buzzer that morning, I wondered if they could see it too. The truth is, money filled my bank account, but it didn't mend the hollow place in my heart. 17 years is a long stretch of silence. And in those years, the quiet from your own child starts to feel like a second kind of loss. At very first, I told myself it was temporary, that Thomas just needed space. I mailed cards, birthday wishes, Christmas greetings, little notes asking how he was. Some came back unopened, stamped * returned to sender. A few made it through but never drew a reply. I kept writing for a while, but after enough silence I stopped. Carrying on a one-sided conversation is worse than saying nothing at all. Then came the photographs. Social media made it impossible to avoid. A neighbor's daughter once showed me a post, not realizing what it meant to me. There they all were. Thomas, Claire, surrounded by smiling relatives at a big summer reunion. The caption read, *another year with everyone together. *everyone but me. It went on like that for years. Baby showers with cakes and balloons. Thanksgiving tables crowded with cousins and grandparents. Birthday candles being blown out while I wasn't even asked to bake. Each photo was like a fresh little wound, reminding me I was no longer part of their picture. The hardest blow of all was finding out I had grandchildren without anyone telling me. I stumbled onto it by accident. I was pushing a cart through the dairy aisle when I ran into a woman who used to live on my street back in Ohio. She smiled and said, "Congratulations, Evelyn. I didn't know you were a grandmother." I must have looked stunned because she tilted her head and added, "Oh, didn't you hear? Thomas and Claire just had a baby girl." I nodded like I already knew, but inside my knees nearly buckled. Later that day I checked online. There she was, a newborn wrapped in pink with Claire's caption, *Our hearts are full. *. My name wasn't mentioned. Not even a text. A whole new life tied to mine by blood. And I had been erased from the story. That was the day I cried the longest. I sat in my car in the grocery lot, clutching the steering wheel, asking myself over and over, where did I go wrong? Did I fail Thomas as a mother? Or had Claire's family simply managed to push me out completely? Guilt is heavy, and for years I carried it like a stone. Every success I built in business came with a whisper. If you had been better, they wouldn't have left you. I replayed Thomas's childhood in my head. Did I work too much? Did I hold on too tight after Robert died? Did I embarrass him without realizing it? No matter how I turned it around, I couldn't find any reason that explained being cut off completely. In time I had to face the truth that sometimes love just isn't enough to keep people close. So I filled the silence with other things. I leaned on St. Mark's Church. At very first I slipped into a back pew on Sundays hoping no one would notice me. But little by little, I found a circle of women who knew what loneliness felt like. Widows, divorcees, even a few mothers shut out by their own children, same as me. We began sharing meals, celebrating small wins, filling in the empty places for each other. Those women became my family of choice, the ones who checked on me when I was sick, or dropped off a hot dish when I was buried in work. And I found peace in the dirt of my garden too. When I settled in New Mexico, folks told me nothing green could make it through the desert heat. But I learned that with patience and the right kind of care, you can coax roses to bloom even in the driest soil. I built my garden piece by piece, laying bricks and shaping beds until it felt like my own small sanctuary. Planting turned into therapy. Watching life push up through rough ground reminded me that broken things can still grow again. And then there was the mentoring. By my early 60s, younger women started asking how I had built my business. They wanted to know how to talk to clients, handle money, and avoid the stumbles I had made along the way. I never set out to be anyone's mentor, but each time I sat across from a hopeful young woman, I felt like I had a purpose again. I told them the things no one ever told me, that they were capable, that their independence mattered, and that no one else got to decide their worth. The silence of those years had hurt me deeply, but it also redirected me. It showed me where to pour my strength. It reminded me that family isn't just blood. Family is whoever takes a seat at your table when everyone else has walked away. Still, if I'm honest, the wound never truly healed. I kept wondering about the grandchildren. Were they healthy? Did they enjoy school? Did they even know my name? I hoped they might one day ask about me, but I never dreamed they would show up at my gate. 17 years slipped by like that, me building my life, them building theirs. Two separate worlds, never touching, until the morning they arrived without warning, shattering the silence I had been forced to carry. When I finally put down roots in New Mexico, I made myself a single promise. If I was going to make a home again, it would reflect the woman I had become, not the woman my family discarded. The house I chose wasn't much to look at when I bought it. An old mission-style estate near Albuquerque, with a sagging roof, cracked tiles, and walls worn thin with years of neglect. Most people saw nothing but trouble. I saw an opportunity. After all, I had spent my life patching holes and mending what others thought couldn't be fixed. This house was just another challenge. The courtyard became my favorite spot. Right in the middle stood a stone fountain, long, dry, and coated in dust. I told myself, if I can make this stone fountain run again, then I can make anything bloom here. It took months, contractors, plumbers, more money than I wanted to admit, but the day water spilled from that stone fountain again, it felt like life itself had returned to me. I poured myself into every corner of that place. Each room became a reflection of survival. I built a bright kitchen with a long wooden table big enough for gatherings I once dreamed of. The living room opened into tall windows where the morning sun turned the space to gold. I created a library lined with books I'd collected over the years, a place where quiet could be comforting instead of punishing. And then came the garden. If the stone fountain was my very first victory, the roses were my heart. Everyone told me roses couldn't survive in the desert, too hot, too dry. But I've learned that anything can thrive with enough care, even in the harshest places. I planted them one by one, red, yellow, pink, and soft white. At very first they looked fragile, but with water, shade, and time they grew strong. Now when I step outside, the air smells sweet, and I see living proof that new beginnings are always possible. That garden is more than flowers. It's where I go when the weight in my chest feels too heavy. It's where I sit to pray. It's where I remind myself that being shut out of one family doesn't mean you stop belonging altogether. Over time, that house became more than just a roof over my head. It turned into a gathering place. I hosted potlucks for neighbors, especially the widows and widowers who didn't want to eat alone. My St. Mark's church group held Bible study at my kitchen table, and often we ended up laughing louder than we read. On birthdays, friends carried in cakes and candles, and the walls that once echoed with silence filled with joy. That house taught me something important. You can build a chosen family. You can open your door to people who appreciate you, even if blood relatives walk away. I'll never forget a single Christmas Eve. My living room was packed with St. Mark's church friends, children darting around with cookies, and the tree glowing bright in the corner. I stood in the doorway watching it all, the laughter, the clinking of dishes, the warmth that filled the air. For the very first time in years, I didn't feel like the woman who had been cast aside. I felt like the woman who built a home where love could live again. And that's what makes the contrast so sharp. While Thomas and Claire chose to erase me, I chose to create a circle of my own. They embraced silence. I embraced community. They scratched my name from invitations. I wrote down the names of those who stood beside me. Do I think about what I missed? Of course I do. I miss cradling my grandchildren when they were tiny. I miss their birthdays, their graduations, the moments that should have had me there. That loss will always be real. But when I walk through my lavender garden, I remind myself I wasn't the one who left. I was the one who stayed, the one who kept trying until there was no dignity left in trying. The home I live in now isn't about wealth or appearances. It's about proof. Proof that the woman once called an embarrassment could build beauty anyway. Proof that survival can turn into triumph, even when others doubt you. Proof that I could fill a space with laughter and love, even without my own child at my side. So when I looked into the camera that morning and saw Thomas and Claire standing outside the gates of the life I built, the thought hit me hard. For 18 years they had kept me out of their world, and now they wanted to step into mine. And I knew whatever reason they had for showing up, it wasn't going to be small. The buzzer sounded again as the gate swung open. I steadied myself in the entryway. My home had welcomed neighbors, friends, pastors, and children running through its halls. But it had never seen Thomas and Claire walk its floors. For 18 years they had chosen silence. And now here they were. The knock came gentle at very first, then firmer, echoing through the entryway. I pulled open the heavy wooden door, and there they were. Thomas stood in front of me, older than his 44 years, his shoulders sagging, his eyes dulled with weariness. Claire wore that same polished smile I remembered all too well, the kind that looked pleasant but never once warmed her eyes. Behind them stood 3 teenagers, a boy and a girl, my grandchildren. They studied me like they weren't sure whether to call me family or stranger. The boy stuffed his hands into his pockets, while the girl's wide eyes wandered the tall arches of my home. "Mom," Thomas said at last, shifting from one foot to the other. "Evelyn," Claire added quickly, stepping forward with arms spread. "You look wonderful." I didn't move to hug her. I only gave a small nod. "Come in." Their shoes clicked across the tile floor as they stepped inside. The children craned their necks at the vaulted ceilings and peered through the glass doors into the courtyard. I could read the surprise on their faces. This was not the picture they'd been given of the woman their parents had cut out long ago. "This place is beautiful," Claire said, her tone sweet but edged with something practiced. "Thank you," I replied, keeping my voice even. Thomas's gaze drifted toward the stone fountain in the courtyard, water spilling gently from tear to tear. "You've done well for yourself," he muttered, half admiration, half something else I couldn't quite name. I gestured toward the living room. "Sit." They settled onto the couches, the children side by side, Claire crossing her legs neatly, smoothing her skirt. Thomas leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his eyes avoiding mine. I poured coffee into cups from the tray I had set out earlier, giving my hands a task while my mind raced. "How have you been?" I asked, though it came out more formal than I intended. Claire jumped in. "Busy. You know how life gets with teenagers. School activities, time just flies." I turned toward the children. "What are your names?" The girl spoke very first. "I'm Sophie," she said with a polite smile. The boy lifted his chin. "Nathan." Nice to meet you, I told them. And I meant it. Meeting them should have filled me with joy, but under the weight of 18 silent years, it only pressed heavy on my heart. The conversation stumbled along in small talk. Claire complimented the rugs, asked about the artwork. Thomas asked when I'd moved to New Mexico, though I knew he already had the answer. I replied politely, but I could feel something brewing beneath their chatter. They hadn't come all this way for coffee. Finally, Thomas cleared his throat. Mom, we didn't just come to catch up. We need to talk about something serious. Claire placed a hand on his arm, steadying him before speaking. Things have been difficult for us. Thomas's business collapsed last year. He tried everything but the contracts dried up. And I lost my teaching job this spring when the school downsized. We've been trying to hold on, but... She paused, her eyes glistening just enough to look convincing. We're on the edge of losing our home. I stayed very still. Thomas finally lifted his eyes to mine. We thought maybe you could help us. Just enough to get back on our feet. There it was. The reason they had come. Not reconciliation. Not regret. Money. I folded my hands in my lap and studied them. Claire leaned forward slightly, as though her smile could soften me. Thomas fidgeted with his fingers, the same nervous habit he'd had as a boy. Sophie and Nathan sat quiet, confusion flickering across their faces. For years I had pictured this moment, the day they might return. I imagined an apology, maybe a conversation about the years that had been stolen. Instead, it came down to dollars. 17 years, I said slowly. 17 years of silence. And now you're here because you want money. Thomas flushed. It's not like that. We thought. Claire cut in quickly. We thought maybe this could be a chance to reconnect. Families go through hard times. This could bring us closer again. Closer. After years of being told I was unwelcome. Closer. After missing every milestone of my grandchildren's lives. I glanced at Sophie and Nathan, softening my eyes for their sake, though inside I felt a storm gathering. Their timing wasn't accidental. They hadn't come when I was lonely or grieving or begging for a place at their table. They had come when they needed saving. I let the silence hang. Thomas stared down at his hands. Claire kept that smile plastered on. The children shifted, waiting for my next words. Instead of answering, I rose and walked into my study. When I returned, I carried a folder. Inside were the reminders I had kept through the years. Proof that what happened wasn't just in my imagination. Some might call it holding on, but for me it was a record, a safeguard against doubting myself. I laid the folder on the coffee table and opened it. Before we talk about money, I said evenly, let's talk about history. Claire shifted in her seat. Thomas's brow furrowed. I pulled out the very first page, a letter. Do you remember this? I asked. Thomas squinted, then went pale. I read aloud. Asterisk Mom, you need to stop interfering in our family. Claire and I want peace, and that means moving forward without you. Please respect that. Do not contact us again. Asterisk. I lowered the paper and looked him straight in the eye. You wrote that, Thomas. 17 years ago. I didn't forget. You asked me to disappear from your life. And I did. The room grew still. Thomas's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Nathan's eyes darted between me and his father, the shock plain on his face. I set the letter aside and reached for the next piece. A photo I had printed years ago, one I'd found online. I slid it across the table. Do you see this? It was a family reunion picture. A long picnic table spread with food, smiles all around. Thomas. Claire. Her parents, cousins, aunts, uncles. Children on laps, teenagers crowding the back row. Beneath it, the caption read, Asterisk complete family together. Asterisk. I tapped the word with my finger. Complete. That's what you wrote, Thomas. That's what you wanted the world to see. That your family was whole without me. I saw it with my own eyes, even though no invitation ever came my way. Claire opened her mouth. Evelyn, that was years ago. People. I lifted my hand. Don't. You meant every word. You erased me. Don't pretend otherwise now. The children leaned closer to study the photo. Sophie whispered, Dad, you never told us. Thomas rubbed his forehead, silent. Then I drew out the last piece. An empty wedding invitation envelope. One I never received. I found out about your wedding from a neighbor who asked if I needed a ride, I said softly. I kept this envelope as a reminder. My own son got married and I wasn't even told the date. I wasn't welcome to sit in the back pew, wasn't given a place at all. Do you know what that does to a mother? Thomas's face flushed crimson. Claire dropped her gaze, her polished smile slipping away. I laid all 3 items before them, the letter, the photo, the reminder of the wedding. These are my receipts, I said plainly. This is why the calls stopped. This is why I stayed away. You told me to go, and you lived like I didn't exist. Silence filled the room. Sophie blinked hard, fighting tears. Nathan shook his head, stunned, seeing for the very first time that his father had shut me out. I folded my hands in my lap. So tell me, Thomas, did you ever miss me? Or is it only my money you miss now? He swallowed, his voice rough. Mom, it wasn't that simple. It was exactly that simple, I cut in. You decided it was easier to erase me than to stand up for me. That was your choice. And now you're here because you've run out of choices. Claire jumped in quickly, her tone sharper. We came because we thought maybe you'd want to be part of the family again. We thought you'd be glad to know your grandchildren. I met her eyes without blinking. I would have loved to know them from the very beginning. But you made sure I didn't. Don't twist this into generosity. You're not offering me a place. You're asking for help because you need it. Sophie's voice came small but steady. Dad, is it true? Did you really tell her not to come? Thomas's shoulders sagged. He didn't answer at very first, then whispered, Yes. The children stared at him, hurt written across their young faces. The truth was out and it was ugly. I gathered the papers and closed the folder. 17 years, I said quietly. 17 years of silence while I built my life without you. I knew if you ever showed up, it wouldn't be out of love. It would be out of need. And here we are. The air grew heavy. The children studied me differently now. Thomas's face was heavy with shame. Claire's expression hardened with frustration. For the very first time in years, I felt steady, the truth sitting squarely on the table between us. I let the quiet stretch until Claire shifted in her seat and Thomas kept his eyes on the floor. Then I spoke. You've made your request. Now I need you to hear mine. Claire leaned forward, hope flashing across her face. Thomas looked at me like a boy awaiting a sentence. The children sat still, their eyes never leaving mine. I will not give you money to save your house or restart a business, I said evenly. I spent too many years working long hours and giving up pieces of my life to pour my savings into people who cut me out without hesitation. That chapter is closed. Claire's smile vanished. Evelyn, you don't understand how desperate we are. We could lose everything. I do understand, I said calmly. I've been desperate myself. The difference is, when I was desperate, I worked harder. I didn't run back to the people I rejected. Thomas raised his head, his face red. So you're just going to turn your back on us, on me? I didn't turn my back, Thomas, I said firmly. You turned yours. I lived 18 years without your voice, without your presence. You made it clear I wasn't part of your life. You don't get to erase me when it's easy and then call me family when you need a check." His head dropped again, shame settling on him. Claire crossed her arms, her voice rising. "So that's it? You have this big house, all this money, and you're going to sit there and let your own son drown?" I leaned forward, steady and sure. "No. I'm going to do something different. Something you may not like, but something I believe is right." I turned to the children. "Sophie, Nathan, I don't know you the way I should. I should have been there when you were born, when you started school. But I wasn't given the chance. That wasn't your fault, and I won't let you carry the weight of choices you never made." They looked at me, uncertain but listening. "I will set up college funds for both of you," I continued. "The accounts will be managed by professionals. You'll be able to use the money only for education, tuition, books, housing. Your parents will not touch a single dollar. That way, no matter what happens, you'll have a future that isn't bound by mistakes from the past." Claire's jaw tightened. "That's insulting. You don't trust us." I met her gaze steadily. "I don't trust people who told me I was an embarrassment and cut me out of their lives. I trust my grandchildren, and I want them to have opportunities, not leftovers." Sophie pressed her lips together, but her eyes shone. Nathan gave a tiny nod, like he was trying to say thank you without words. Thomas's voice came low. "Mom, we need help now. The kids can't wait years for some fund. We're losing our house." I shook my head. "You have to face the results of your choices. I won't bail you out. That wouldn't help you grow or change. But I won't punish the children for your decisions either. My line is clear." The room weighed heavy with my words. Claire's cheeks burned red with anger. Thomas sat hunched, torn between pride and need. The children looked quietly relieved, as though I'd given them something precious they hadn't expected. Claire shot to her feet. "We didn't come here to be insulted." "No," I said, rising too. "You came here to be told the truth. You came here expecting me to forget the past and open my wallet. That isn't going to happen. I can't erase what you did to me, but I can make sure I don't repeat it with your children." Thomas rose slowly, his voice rough. "I never thought it would come to this. It came to this the day you decided I was easier to erase than defend," I answered. "I didn't walk away, Thomas, you pushed me out. And now I'm drawing a line that protects me, while still giving Sophie and Nathan a chance. That's as far as I'll go." The children stood, their faces torn but grateful. Sophie whispered, "Thank you," so soft I almost didn't hear it. Nathan kept his eyes on the floor, but he gave a small nod. I walked them to the door, steady as stone. Claire stormed past me without a word. Thomas lingered for a moment, his eyes glassy, but he couldn't find the words. Finally, he followed her out. I closed the door behind them and laid my hand against the wood. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel bitter. I felt steady. For once, I hadn't been pulled back into their cycle of rejection and need. I had set my boundary and held it firm. And as I looked out the glass toward my lavender garden, I reminded myself of a single truth. I won't reward cruelty, but I won't punish children for it either. Standing there, I realized my heart was calm. No racing pulse, no frantic thoughts about what they thought of me. What I felt instead was release. I stepped into my garden. The sun was sinking low, spreading golden light across the roses. The only sound was the trickle of the stone fountain. I sat on the bench I had placed there years ago and let out a long breath. For 18 years I carried the weight of rejection. I replayed memories over and over, wondering what I could have done differently. And for 18 years I feared that if they ever returned, I might crumble under the need for their approval. But here I was still standing. I hadn't bent to guilt. I had drawn my line and kept it. The roses reminded me why. They grew strong not because the desert was kind, but because I gave them care. They bloomed because I created the conditions they needed. That was me too. I built a life not because it was easy, but because I refused to wither. The next week I went to my St. Mark's Women's Circle. We gather on Wednesday evenings in the parish hall, a circle of women who've all weathered storms of their own. I told them what happened. The knock at my door, the request for money, the folder of proof I laid on the table. When I finished, the room sat quiet. Then Mildred, a widow with kind eyes, leaned forward. "Evelyn," she said, "you did what so many of us are afraid to do. You stood your ground. Family is the ones who stand with you, not the ones who shut you out." The others nodded, and a wave of peace washed over me. She was right. Family isn't titles or bloodlines. It's presence. It's who shows up when storms roll in, not just when they need shelter. Driving home that night, I realized something else. For years, I had longed for an apology, some recognition of the hurt they caused. But facing them showed me I didn't need their words anymore. I had already healed where it mattered. Their choices had shaped me, but they didn't define me. I don't know what comes next with Thomas and Claire. Maybe they'll stay angry forever. Maybe one day Sophie and Nathan will reach out to me themselves. Either way, I'm at peace. I know I gave those children something real, a chance, a door to their future, and I know I refused to let myself be used. That balance was enough. Standing in my garden that night, I thought of all the women like me, mothers, grandmothers, aunts, who have felt the ache of being cut out, erased from tables where they once set the meal. It's a deep hurt, one that lingers. But let me tell you this. You are stronger than the silence. You can build again.
That was my story. What do you think about it? Would you have acted the same way or chosen differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to read them. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe to the Keeping Secrets channel for more stories like this. Oh, and one more thing. This story is our little secret, so shh.